Valve's new game Deadlock is here, and it already has a cool world of lore, heroes, villains and story, and a world to explore. Hey and welcome, I'm Hammeh. In this video I'm going to be going through some of what we know about the world of Deadlock so far. Its heroes and villains, their backstories, the lore of the world, some things you may have seen, and a lot you won't have done. As Deadlock is a new game and we're at the beginning of a whole new world and hopefully journey of storytelling and world building, important to know where I've sourced this from. It is from hero bios, yes, but also map Easter eggs exploring the mapping game, hero interactions before they start matches, their voice work with other characters, and many more. Timecodes and stamps are in the description if you want to skip around particular topics or themes. Okay, it's time to dive into an alternate universe, a world of the supernatural every day. In our world, people have believed in the spiritual, the occult, and the supernatural for many centuries. And whether it's UFOs or ghosts, it's in humanity's nature to try and find explanations and rationalizations for things that we believe that we see and we perhaps can't explain. Deadlock's earliest story point so far starts in an actual real-world event, the Salem witch trials of the 1690s. In real-life Puritan colonial Massachusetts, 19 people would eventually be executed for witchcraft, the deadliest witch hunt in the history of North America, and a very notorious case of what was mass hysteria most likely. With over 200 people accused and brought before the notorious John Haythorne and other magistrates, official pardons for the people killed only came as recently as 2001. In the world of Deadlock, which is many years before this, one of the 19 who was executed back in the 1600s was sniper spirit we know now as Vindicta. The supernatural had been part of the Deadlock world for many years, but had been explained away by the public most of the time as mere fiction. In one of the rifts between dimensions and planes that inhabit Earth in the world of Deadlock, for example, Nessie was cited as coming through and joining our world as a relatively benign trans-dimensional traveller. However, it seems that the world of Deadlock became mostly aware of the supernatural in a public sense 50 years ago from the present day. This was the rough timing of the first event known as a Maelstrom, which introduced the supernatural to the world at large. Maelstroms apparently can last very brief times from 20 minutes of up to 2 hours, and during these, which often happen during an eclipse or other event, mystic energies are at their height. During Maelstroms, very powerful events can happen. The dead, for example, can be brought back to life as spirits. This is how Vindicta came back to life hundreds of years after she was killed in the events of this first Maelstrom. Potentially, this can even transcend to inanimate objects. Ivy, the gargoyle and protector of Spanish Harlem, and another character in Deadlock, was brought to life 18 to 20 years ago. And although it's not noted in her bio, this could potentially be due to a Maelstrom. Having come back to the world hundreds of years later, Vindicta, having had a second chance of life of a sort due to a Maelstrom, is fighting a one-spirit battle against the descendants of John Haythorne. There is a neo-inquisition in the world called the Friends of Humanity. In other Deadlock lore sources, these are petitioning the government. They are very much advocating for humanity above the supernatural in terms of rights and more. Vindicta is leaving a body count as she tries to lay waste to Hawthorne's descendants who shared his morals. During this first Maelstrom, also other spirits came from other planes, and some of these made pacts with or deals with humanity. An example of such a deal and such a spirit is the relationship between Lady Jean Geist and an entity known as Oathkeeper. A member of high society, a French lady who married a German, Geist was nearing the end of her days in a nursing home until, after the first Maelstrom, Oathkeeper, a powerful spirit from another plane, visited her. Oathkeeper offered to restore her youth in exchange for draining the essence of the living to feed him. Geist, wanting to have her youth and her best days back, accepted this Faustian bargain, and by warding Oathkeeper around her arm, managed to keep him under some kind of control, feeding him when she chose to. However, the ward is weakening, Oathkeeper is hungry and strengthening, and soon she may have to decide how she can pay the price. During a Maelstrom, there are such cascades of mystic energy that it is an ideal time to try and make contact with other planes and other dimensions, and many people use this time to try and contact mysterious entities known as the Patrons, which are effectively the objectives of a game of Deadlock. Outside of Maelstroms, another important facet of the supernatural in Deadlock's world are the Astral Gates. We've yet to know if Maelstroms are related to the opening of or activation of Astral Gates, but these rifts in space and time exist at several points over the Deadlock world. Now, when an astral gate appears, many things can happen that can change the world forever. they appear with huge energy, so it seems. Professor Dynamo, one of Deadlock's heroes, went to observe, with his scientific mind and inquisitive nature, an astral gate opening in New York. He was caught by such tremendous force and energy that he was ripped out of his body, which was atomized, and his spirit was reduced to a dying star. Thankfully, Dynamo found a way to house his essence and continues to be a professor at Columbia College, whilst trying to find a way to get his body restored. When an astral gate is open, things can travel through to Earth from planes beyond. Nessie, or the Loch Ness Monster, as I mentioned before, is cited in Deadlock Lore as being a relatively friendly or benign example. However, much worse things can also travel through. Underneath the oceans of the world at the moment, a creature or entity known only as the Adversary stalks the depths of the oceans. Coming to the surface and creating themselves a goo-like body, a sentient sea anemone, only known as Viscous, is trying to make contact with the patrons for this very reason, to understand and protect the sea from this monstrosity. From character bios, voice lines in game and details on the maps, we actually know a reasonable bit about Astral Gates. At the moment there are 7 known of in the world. A new dormant one has recently been found in Europe, shared by the New York Oracle, New York's prominent news on the occult and supernatural, but more on them later. We do of course know that there's one in New York, that's the one that hurt Professor Dynamo, and there is one underneath the Bermuda Triangle, or certainly in the Atlantic Ocean. This is the one mentioned in Viscus's biography. It seems like some astral gates have been open on Earth for a long time and creatures and things have been travelling through, it's just that humanity weren't aware of it. Other astral gates remain unconfirmed or unexplored. Now, there is likely an 8th astral gate in the Arctic Circle. Famous scientist Kelvin put together a team to explore rumours of this gate 1.5 years ago from present day, and the expedition all mysteriously vanished. Kelvin was found clutching a rock with glowing runes over it. He had no pulse, no blood, but somehow was alive. With no memory of anything that happened, Kelvin is now looking for answers. So that's a little introduction to the world of Deadlock and how the supernatural came into the world. But how long has the world actually been this way? Well, it's very early days and Deadlock is still in alpha testing, so of course the lore and story and a lot of the details could change. But as of now, we have a few reference points to try and put Deadlock into a bit of a dated order for some of the key timeline events. We know that the first Maelstrom, or when the world became more aware of the supernatural, was roughly 50 years ago. This is from Warden's bio. He's one of a long line of militant alchemists who, when the supernatural came to the world, finally had their purpose realised. As the world in Deadlock came to terms with the supernatural and planes beyond, there was a period of acclimatization. We know that 40 years or so ago in the timeline, Grey Talon, real name Wesley, was one of the founding members of an organisation known as the Baxter Society, and monsters who preyed on humanity in particular, the supernatural or otherwise, started being hunted as of then. We don't know how many Maelstroms have actually occurred since the first well-known one 50 years or so ago. However, outside of that first Maelstrom, we do know that other supernatural events have taken place, Maelstroms or not, that have brought creatures to life. Ivy, for example, came to life 18 or so years ago and started protecting and defending the Arroyo family and Spanish Harlem, eventually liberating it from the gang that was pursuing the family and their daughter, Sophia, who found Ivy. Before we move on from dating, when roughly could Deadlock be if it's a parallel version of our world? Well, some speculation here, but there is one voice line from the in-game newspaper The New York Oracle that I'll talk more about later that says this.
Is dating in the 1900s too complicated? These 20-somethings tell all.
So, of course, that may not be the 1900s. We know that Deadlock is a world where spirits can come back to life, so maybe these are people from the 1900s. But that said, if the New York Oracle is talking about today's events, then Deadlock could well be set in the 1900s. Before we jump into the everyday supernatural and how that manifests in Deadlock's world, just a quick shout: if you're enjoying this video, please throw a like, subscribe, really helps me out. Comment in the comments with any questions or things you'd like me to explore. I'm going to be doing a bunch of Deadlock content and a lot more little videos coming as well. Back to the world of Deadlock, we know how the world became roughly the way it is and how long this has been going on for, but what has been happening in the day-to-day of the life of the Deadlock world's inhabitants? Clearly, the world took a little bit of time to get used to the presence of the supernatural and all that could mean, and we're now in the Deadlock world 50 years on to a stage where the supernatural, the paranormal, the spiritual, and humanity live side by side together. Whether it's Crowley's convenience stores in the menus, shout out if you're a Good Omens fan, or having a drink at Jezebel's, the bar where the Ixian bartender Infernus, Fern to his friends could pour you a drink, entities, creatures, demons and more from other planes have made their way to Earth and are very much part of life. And items and services that previously would have been seen in fantasy stories are now just part of everyday New York, for New York is where Deadlock's map is set. Whether it's the imported occult goods of Maxsound and Hoff, adverts for different brands of amulets or even horn wax, or even little nods in the map to red and blue of the Team Fortress universe, including this paint service selling bullet-resistant paint. The world of Deadlock and New York in the Deadlock universe is very much the mystical living alongside the mundane. Many different entities live and work as part of the Deadlock world. You have Abrams, for example, the cop and private detective. You also have Hayes, the mysterious person who works for the OSIC, the Occult Security and Investigations Commission. Now, the world of Deadlock is really nicely fleshed out by a couple of different things within the actual game. One of them is the New York Oracle newsstands. Now, these are part of the map on both sides. They are easy to miss in a standard match with all of the frantic back and forth, but if you stand by them, listen to them, walk away and come back, you can hear a bunch of voice lines from them that do a whole bunch of explaining and give a lot of colour to what's going on in the world of Deadlock. I've picked a few examples of it for you here, and we'll do a specific video on it separately. The New York Oracle, for example, tells us that lycanthropy and shapeshifters are living amongst humanity. We know that spirits can go for Congress.
The Supreme Court today upheld Cindermont versus the state of Alabama, paving the way for the Spirit's congressional bid. Read all about it in the New York Oracle.
A being known as Cindermont apparently ran for Congress, was stopped by a legal case in the state of Alabama, but the Supreme Court have upheld the challenge, so could we see the supernatural in Congress at some point? We hear of the New York team, the New York Knickerbockers, not quite sure what sport that's in. There are many, many more that I'll share, but in terms of two key ones. Number one, we know that the world of Earth and our world, and particularly the USA, has foreign or interplanar relations with other realms and with other planes. And one realm that is mentioned a lot in the lore so far is the realm of Ixia.
Looking at taking a vacation to Ixia? Read the New York Oracle for helpful travel tips to the Outer Planes.
Now, we know two people from the lore who are from Ixia. One of them is Infernus, or Fern, with his fire control abilities, and the other mention is Grey Talon, or Wesley's daughter-in-law, who sadly, along with his son and with his grandchild, was killed in a supposed house fire. Grey Talon found this unusual because Ixians have control over fire, so therefore, if his family was sadly found in a blaze, then they must have been dead long before the fire was started. Very suspicious. That's the reason that Grey Talon has, by the way, taken up his bow at a grandfather age and is looking for vengeance on whoever killed his family. Now, Ixia is comprised of several areas or planes even itself. South Ixia is actually the 52nd state of the USA.
Next week will mark the 5-year anniversary of South Ixia officially joining the United States as its 52nd state. See how folks are planning to celebrate across the country in today's edition of the New York Oracle.
It seems, however, that there is war going on in other parts of Ixia, and we're unsure as to whether it's perhaps our Earth that's the aggressor or part of the defense of South Ixia, or whether it's other parts of Ixia that are attacking South Ixia, from this voice line from the New York Oracle.
As the military campaign in Ixia continues, the controversial political organization Friends of Humanity announced a rally in New York to demand the U.S. cease sending aid to the Outer Planes.
You might be wondering who's the 51st state of the US? It is none other than Puerto Rico, which was gained statehood or joined the US after one of the gates to the Outer Planes was discovered there. Outside of the day-to-day, how do supernatural entities and humanity live alongside each other? Well, after the initial settling in period, some things were deemed not to really be allowed. Laws and rules were put down so that humanity could interact with the supernatural and spiritual, and the spiritual could interact with humanity without any ongoing problems. For the worst kinds of criminals, there is a place called Lost Whisper. Think of it as an oubliette for the most dangerous occult threats from around the world, human, spiritual or otherwise, kind of an Alcatraz of the supernatural world. This is where one of the characters in the roster, Seven, escaped from. It's not been explained why he ended up in there. Pursuing knowledge is what one of the patrons says at the beginning of the game when you spawn as Seven, but on the night they decided to try and obliterate his soul from existence, more thorough than an execution, so that his soul could not be contacted, resurrected or used by anyone afterwards. He managed to escape. The wards of the 7 most powerful ritualists in the world failed, and Seven took a bloody revenge on everyone present. With the mystical, spiritual and supernatural come even greater threats and enemies. On the lighter side from the New York Oracle, necromancers and doomsayers are on the everyday news in the papers. In a world where mysticism is rife, science of course is seemingly the younger brother trying to play catch up with all of the advances in mystic technology. But metaphysicists aren't giving up. And interestingly, there's even a line about the US negotiating with the Jinn about potentially selling Wyoming. Now, from a little bit of mining of pre-release files, there are a bunch of heroes in Deadlock who have not actually been released or announced yet. They are work in progress. In a little bit of the exploration around the files, there are nods to a potential Jinn hero, or a hero associated with the Jinn and this line, and the Jinn as a race of beings are looking for their own homeland, which is where this Wyoming line might come up.
Jinn Ambassador Neshala Dion has arrived in New York as negotiations continue. But is the U.S. government really okay with selling Wyoming? For this story and more, pick up the New York Oracle today.
Airships are the common way of inter-country travel in Deadlock, and Zephyr spirits make them move fast. And last but not least, there is a cafe in Soho, New York, run by familiars.
A Soho cat cafe run by familiars has charmed the community. But to owners Mittens and Peppermint, it's just another day making biscuits.
So with all these New York Oracle lines, if you're playing Deadlock, swing by the stand, listen to some. I will share a bunch of stuff in the lore learnings in a future video, but it's really cool that the world is already being built out through these lines and more. Okay, now time for a bit about Deadlock's map and the setting and the lore of the ritual. Deadlock's map is set in New York, and the theme of a Deadlock match is roughly trying to summon the patrons, these powerful extraplanar beings who are capable effectively of granting wishes, although you have to be careful how you do so. Two teams, the Sapphire Flame and the Amber Hand, are battling for control of fonts of power and battling to try and summon the patron so that they can get what they are looking for. It could be information, it could be a request. And at the start of the match, you can hear your patron tell each character a bit about what they may want, try and tempt them and similar. Now, I won't play all of those now, but for example, Professor Dynamo wants his body back. The patron will talk to him about his wife, Marta, and how she actually wants to hug him, not a metal body.
You've paid a terrible price for knowledge, Professor. But today, you can make things right. Your wife seeks to embrace flesh, not steel. Don't fail her. Don't fail yourself. Complete the ritual.
Listen to the interactions as the match starts with your hero of choice. I'll be sharing a lot more lore about individual heroes in my hero lore videos coming in the coming weeks. Whether inside New York or outside, we learn a bit about the lore of various factions and organisations from Deadlock bios and in Game 2, so I'll run through a few of them here. In New York, as we've just talked about the map, we have the Tunnel Rats that Mo and Krill are a member of. Now, there are a bunch of tunnels between the boroughs, and these are maintained by the Tunnel Rats, who aid smuggling and movement of goods between them. So enforcers exist like Mo and Krill to make sure that people behave. In New York, there's also Wraith's gang. I believe it's unnamed at the moment, but she is very much the head of gambling and in control of the gambling trade in the city. Now, from voicelines as well, the trade took her father's life, or so it seems. It consumed him. She wants to cement her legacy, and the patron is tempting her to try and do that. As for other factions, here are a couple of notable ones. We've previously mentioned the Baxter Society. Now, this has existed probably for at least 40 or so years, as Grey Talon was a founding member, and it's an international order of monster hunters, specifically focusing on those that are preying on the living. Grey Talon is affiliated with the Baxter Society, but a current member is also Shiv, another of Deadlock's heroes. Shiv is apparently a little unorthodox for the other members of the Society's taste, but apparently he's very effective. Another faction that will be key in the lore or an organisation is the OSIC, the Occult Security and Investigation Commission. Now, they're described in character Hayes' bio as being a black box organisation that makes the CIA look transparent. The OSIC's job is to keep the country safe from sinister entities that are beyond the scope of local law enforcement. So they are kind of a occult FBI, CIA type broader jurisdiction. Hayes is part of the OSIC. They are part of the Sandman division, who are apparently only rumoured, but these people and entities infiltrate dreams of people of interest. They assess if they're going to be a threat or not, and they put them to sleep permanently, if necessary. another organisation that shows up is Paradox. Now Paradox, from Paradox the characters lore for They Are Legion, they are a collective, kind of give me the vibes of a combination of, let's say, Anonymous with kind of Robin Hood style vibes as well. They try to make sure that no one is beyond touch. They almost, I would say, rob and pull very spectacular heists for the sake of it, whether they are apparently stealing rare artifacts, state secrets, or even celebrity paternity tests. They then proceed to display these in pop-up museums so that people can presumably be embarrassed and people can also share in the delights of their activities. You kind of give up your name and identity to be a part of Paradox, so the Paradox that we play as in game actually has a Scottish accent. There are also a variety of companies in Deadlock. Now, a key one that I'll mention outside of the various brands and companies mentioned on the map is Fairfax Industries. This is a family-run industrial company. Maximilian Fairfax is the current father and head of the company. He, or so it seems from the voice lines, went to university with Professor Dynamo. Now, Fairfax Industries are seen as part of, if not the biggest part of, the occult industrial complex, not the military industrial complex, but the two are almost overlapping in the world of Deadlock. They have various different divisions. One of them is a paramilitary type division, almost a private military company called Eldritch Tactical Solutions. The New York Oracle says this about them.
Eldritch Tactical Solutions, a subsidiary of Fairfax Industries, comes under fire as new allegations are made by former employees. Are these soldiers of fortune committing war crimes? The New York Oracle investigates.
Fairfax's main business seems to be weapons, and in their military R&D division, one of the heroes and characters who heads that up is Maggie McGuinness. Now, she's a prodigy inventor, managing to design a machine that harvests the souls of the dead at age 15. She's not totally happy, from voice lines, with Fairfax and their work, but she likes the money, and because of it, she says she can sleep pretty soundly at night. And last but not least, there is, of course, presumably the heir to the Fairfax Industries throne, Aaron Fairfax. Now, as a child, they were left for dead by being shot on their 18th birthday, and they have been in hiding for the past 5 years. They are now known as Pocket, trying to develop their own identity separately from their family, but also keep themselves safe. So we need to find out what the actual machinations are and what happened with Pocket's story, because presumably Pocket's father, Maximilian Fairfax, is still going around perfectly fine. Finally, a quick chat about the heroes and villains. Now, I'm going to go into all of their lore separately as we learn more about them and as things come, so keep an eye out for those videos and shorts, as well as on TikTok. But if you haven't played Deadlock, then we have a very interestingly monstrous, supernatural, sympathetic, even there's one character called Lash who is just defined in his bio as being an asshole. In reality, he is an underground blood sport type fighter who fights for his ego and prestige. Right down to Viscous, the blob of goo who can turn themselves into a gelatinous cube, a sentient anemone from the depths of the ocean. The cast is really quirky and fun. There are some very interesting characters. Some deeper story is being developed, it seems, for these characters from various leaks that have popped up over different time. I haven't mentioned those specifically here, but I'll see if they can be talked about in future. So between the world building on the levels, between the voice lines of the characters, between even voice lines on the actual maps that can play, and all of the characters' hero bios, a really nice world is coming together with Deadlock Lore, and I can't wait to explore it more. There you go, that's a little exploration so far into what we know about Deadlock's world and lore. Now, if you like this video, please throw a like, subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more Deadlock content and lore, really helps me out, and comment with what you enjoyed and any questions you may have. I do a bunch of gaming, lore, story and world building content on this channel too, so check out my previous Deadlock videos or any of other videos on games I've done in these playlists here. Cheers for tuning in, I've been Hammeh, and hopefully see you next time. Take it easy.